because, I mean, as I tell the story, we were in a very secluded, area as well.
A
So
farm.
yes, a farm. So to me, it was a lot of deliberation, because I knew these are elderly parents of mine. And really, I was their feet in many ways at that time, and the hands that were helping my mother to care for my father as well. But there were times when I would think, but very briefly, when I would be thinking, okay, what does this mean for me in the long term? And also because there are people who would come and visit, family members and such, who would be asking me directly and my mother, how long will this child, be here, instead of her going out there and living, like other young people? She must get, employment as well, do whatever it is that she can to advance her own life, and have a sense of her personal agency as well, besides just looking after, her father. But for me, it was most important that I be there with them. I think that was the higher call for me, rather than going out to, to land a job. But yes, indeed, there were times when I thought about it. And then I would just push it to the back of my mind and say, things will work out as they should. For now, this is where I need to be. And I made the sacrifice consciously as well. Because at that time, I tell the story in the book that I had already left home, to look for work, and then came back, at the realization that I was needed at home. And did that with ngesixhosa ngenhliziyo emhlophe. So it was really, really, really from the bottom of my heart that I did it. And I had no regrets at that time.
Yeah.
And even afterwards, I never had any regrets about it.
I was going to ask that, any regrets if given a second chance, would you take the same decision?
Oh, yes. 100 times over, I would take the same decision. And I wouldn't change a thing, actually, Khanyisa George, because I think this journey has brought me to this place. If this had not happened, I wouldn't be sitting here having this conversation with you. There wouldn't be a book behind me. The story would be different. Maybe there would be a book, but maybe it would be a different kind of a book. But we are on this journey with this girl because she has gone through all these different stages of her existence. And that stage was very, very character building for me. Remember, I'm a girl who has just come out of university. I make this decision, almost instantly. I didn't even have to think about it after hearing the news that my father was not well. And I would make it over and over again. Yes.
Okay. And I had mentioned earlier, if we should expect a part 2, and you didn't want to commit, fair enough, I take it. But reading through the book, I couldn't help but notice that there are parts that are left incomplete, if I were to put it like that.
All right.
Deliberately or not, I don't know it, but it made me curious. I understand you explained that there is a thick transcript somewhere, but yeah, somewhere
Yes.
waiting. I'm a optimistic person, so I'm hopeful that one day we'll see something. But I'm just curious to know, because there's a question that I want to ask linked to that. Umathi Kapa uphi yena ngoku? Who
Oh,
is
gosh.
taking care of him?
Oh, no. Mama. All right. Mama is still with us, as I mentioned earlier. So Mama is elderly. She's well over 80 years old. And she, I can say that she's being taken care of somewhere. Somewhere. And I think from anybody who reads the book, we are grateful that she has been granted, the grace to live as long as she has. A lot has happened, and as we will learn, in the story, a lot has happened to her, not just to this child who is Wawa. So yeah, she's strong. She's strong for her age. She's still my mother, in many ways. Of course, not the mother who was taking care of me when I was a child, but we can say she's okay under the circumstances. We can say she's okay. Yes.
Okay. No, it's fine.
Yes.
I will leave it at that.
Thank you.
But the reason why I was curious on this big sacrifice, because in our communities, especially
Yes.
your so-called I want to say middle class households,
Yes.
one notices that at some point where the heads of the households, when they become elderly, then that's when you start seeing some interests cropping in, because you've got these fragile elders
Yes.
who has got this homestead that they made to be what it is.
What it is.
And they want to die in their household.
They do.
They don't want to go to some old age home somewhere,
Yes.
even though there are means for them to go there.
Yes.
They would rather that
Be in their
person comes
home
and take care of them here at home.
Yes.
And now if the children are working very far, it becomes, it puts a strain, because now you want to be there physically and emotionally, so that
Yes.
if anything happens, because you feel like you owe it to them, that you
Right.
are where you are and who you are.
Right.
But at the same time, you can't be there because of work. That's why I was like, it does become a big sacrifice.
Yes.
If you decide, because you must make that choice. Do you prioritize your career?
Yes.
Or do you prioritize taking care of them until they pass on,
Right.
knowing that then they will go in peace? Because you don't want to because if they don't want to go to an old age home, what can you do?
What can you do?
And then that's where usually the dynamics come in, because there will be those interests. And then
Yes.
I mean, it's something that is becoming a societal issue. And I think, part of those issues that remain unaddressed, they have a potential, because some of the family feuds that we come across, they at times are as a result of that.
That's
there's
right.
a saying in Xhosa,
Oh,
and then
yes.
that's when now, when the head goes, then
Yes.
that's when now there's that competition of interest. And then what used to be beautiful at times
Yes.
get to be tainted.
Yes.
And
Tainted. Yes. No,
yeah, but so
I hear you. I hear you,
yeah.
Khanyisa, and you're right. You're right. It has become prevalent in our society, that I don't know if it's with our generation specifically. I suspect it's always been there. I say so because Udada, because he would have these real conversations with me while we'd be driving to different places together. And then he once told me the story of brothers who were, in a serious tussle over their parents' inheritance. So Utata would be telling me the stories. I'd be wondering, why is he telling me this stuff? I'm a child, but he'd be telling me these big adult stories all the time. And it seems that I actually absorbed them. And sometimes I will just, go back and reflect on the archives that are there, clearly stored somewhere in my brain, that, oh, he once told me about this. And I don't know if he was indirectly, telling me this is how life can turn out, and I treasure that. But really, these are things that I believe need to be addressed in our communities. And I'm going to start with the issue of the practical preparation by parents for their children when they have, substantial assets and such stuff, to say, document this stuff, do it while you're still lucid, do it while you still, while there's vitality in your body, and you can make these choices yourself. And so that whatever happens, that these are decisions that cannot be contested, even in your absence. These are issues that we deal with now. And a lot of people, especially in our culture, a lot of people don't have their wills drawn up. They don't believe in it. They simply say, these children will just deal with it when I'm gone. As long as I'm not here, it's up to them. But they don't realize that after they're gone, it also affects their legacy. It also affects so much more in terms of the family health going forward. So it's important to think of that as well. How is this going to affect the relationships between your children? How is it going to affect just your sense of not just posterity really, but just the sense of stability in what you leave behind? I think it becomes important. Don't only be concerned about the well-being of your family while you are here, but think about the repercussions once you are gone and we send you off with the rest in peace. Yes, you may go off to a peaceful place, but please try and find ways to leave peace behind for your children and children's children as well. You might not make everybody happy, but at least when everything has been drawn up clearly, and this doesn't mean you have to disclose it to anybody, but at least these are your wishes and they will be well known. That's very important. And I think we need to seek help in this regard, and get the advice that you need and get your stuff in order. Even for Unathi, who is turning 41 this year, do it now. Don't say, I'll worry about that when I'm gray. You don't know if you're going to be here tomorrow. And even for people that have small children, Khanyisa guys, even to us, if you have small children, and they are going to inherit stuff from you before they are, of an age where they can take care of their own stuff, their own affairs. There are trusts, that can be established for your children, so that there are no squabbles afterwards, with this aunt wanting this child, that uncle wants this, because everybody wants to benefit from whatever it is that you have left behind, because when you have no will, or the state ends up having to intervene because, there's nothing in black and white stating how your stuff is to be distributed. So these things are very important. And these are other conversations that we need to have about how we as African people can, see what distributor njani amafa. That's the bottom line, because amafa ayalwisa, ayaxabanisa, and people get into real feuds over this stuff. So yes, it becomes important. And Lendwi Tetayo as well, of our elders, looking after our elders, and not just sending them off to old age homes and such. I'm not going to refer to my personal situation on this, but just broadly speaking, I think we owe it to our parents and grandparents to care for them in their old age, just to, not even as a payback for what it is that they've done for us, but rather just, it's the humane thing to do. It is the humane thing to do. I'm not going to say it's the African thing to do, because people are going to say, we've become progressive. I can take them to such and such old age home. There's air conditioning there, that kind of stuff. No, just let's do the humane thing, because your grandmother maybe would love for you to rub their feet rather than a stranger. Maybe they need your specific touch. And that's very important. I think these are some of the things that we need to revisit as a people. Are they working for us? Are they working in our favor, or are they working against us?
In fact, when I was growing up, my grandmother always insisted that taking care of the elders is a particular, like, ukunakekela abantu abadala kuzakuzisela intsikelelo.
Yes.
So taking care of the elders is going to bring you blessings. So
yes.
Do you think there's truth in that, or it was just some form of brainwashing to ensure that you get to do this? I'm asking it in light of the point you just made now.
Yes.
Do you think there's some element of truth in that?
I believe so. I believe there is some element of truth to it. And I think if I may take it to the biblical context, of, honoring your mother and your father, so your days may be long, all of that stuff. There's so much that speaks to honoring, our parents. And I think it goes beyond just writing about them in books. It's nice to write a book. It's good. You're honoring your parents, and their names will be somehow, etched in history some way, that they did these incredible things in the world. But when it really comes to when the rubber hits the road, when your parent is lying on a bed and they can't fend for themselves and they're entirely dependent on your benevolence, by nature, I believe that the roles should be reversed, because they took care of you when they were raising you. Now it's your turn to care for them as they go into that childlike state, because they do become like children at that age.
Yeah, that's true.
And do I think that blessings will come from that? Absolutely. I think just as you would even for strangers, you will be blessed immensely, I think, by looking after your parents and seeing to their actual, immediate needs. Yes.
Yeah. And in my personal view, I think as we are advocating for that, maybe at some point we should also ensure that we cross-reference it with that earlier point that you made about parents ensuring that they do everything in their power to protect their legacy that they will be leaving behind, because I think as we grow, I'm going to going back to our earlier conversation about Istuku, when I asked about Umami, you can't give me a straight answer, and you are growing up, and that now I personally I am witnessing it to a point wherein a parent would rather not do that because he or she does not want to offend some of her children. Almost, let's say you've got these 3 children, and you've got this one who is responsible, that that she will be able to take over your legacy. You've got this one that just doesn't get, but now you don't want to take that bold decision and say, you know what, my kids, if something happens to me, I would like so and so to take. It doesn't have to be a firstborn to care, and then you shall support whilst you are alive, so that the fight happens whilst you are still alive, and then you see it happening, so that when you're gone, the transition just
has already taken place.
Yes.
The transition is smoother as well.
It's because yes, kwakude kuthiwe ngumyolelo, and umntu ebeyolela engekasweleki. But when you are at that point when you feel, then uyolele uba I would want this and this and this and this to happen. Obviously emotions will run high, but you still have a couple of days or even months, because nobody knows when he or she is going to go, for the dust to settle. Because until now they are still respecting you because you're alive. So now that one is assuming that role. So by the time you go, that one that was appointed is already also kind of settled in that, of which it's something that our parents now are avoiding. Hence the issue of wills that also get to be contested, and it's not as maybe as we saying let's get back to our roots and taking care of all this, but let's also say, parents, be honest enough
to
take the infamous decisions.
Yes, and you be the one who takes the heat as well. I think
Yeah,
it's so
exactly.
it's so important, Khanyisa, because I think most times the beneficiaries are the ones who suffer as though they had something to do with the decision. It's like you must have influenced her somehow, or him, if it's, you know, your father.
Exactly.
You know,
Exactly.
and it's a decision that was made independently. And I think also there's something that needs to be hashed out as well, you know, in our society, a sense of entitlement to our loved ones' stuff. Where does this thing come from? Where we think, okay, you know, it's cast in stone. I'm going to inherit my parents' stuff. And if there's three of you, you assume everything is going to be split equally amongst the three of us. I'm like, these are not shares. You know, this is not a company. There's a human being here who actually has to make the decision. So that sense of entitlement. And I think also for the parents to not have a sense of, you know, it's this thing that it's obvious that my children will take care of me when I'm old.
Yeah.
Regardless of how you've treated your children when you were able-bodied and life was happening for you, and then you come here and make all sorts of demands or expectations, rather, that I birthed you, Kaloko, you know.
It's that sense of entitlement you're talking about.
Entitlement, yes. and this guilt now that you must carry because, oh, this person, but they didn't take any kind of responsibility towards you. Chances are they also maybe didn't even acknowledge you as their child in some cases. And now that, you know, they can see that you are the best placed child to look after their needs. Suddenly they remember now that they birthed you. There are also those issues that we need to tackle, because these things plague us in our communities, but we don't talk about them. We talk about them in spaces like social media, for example, because we become so emboldened on social media, when, you know, keyboard warriors that we are. And when you have to face your family, and it becomes an uphill climb, because now here are the people, they are not faceless, and now your parents are sitting there waiting. What did you say we needed to be addressed about again? And you become this little girl suddenly now. Oh no, what I wanted to say, you know, there are things here at home. Yet you're this big shot, you know, at work and stuff. Where handles, you can handle, you can navigate the boardroom, but you come home and you're mousy. And I think we just need, maybe we need mediators as well. You know,
we were brainwashed.
Yes.
I always say I was brainwashed by the Bible. You know, the 10 Commandments.
Yes.
I think that line should be deleted. It should be deleted, that line. It should be deleted. Because now when you get to that and then you start thinking, you don't want to upset her, because if she gets upset and then now you don't want to live with that. Right. And then now you angered your parents, you had angered God. So now you are, it's not right.
And that's the thing. Oh, the guilt trip of God has commanded it. Oh, my word. Yes. No. I think these things are, and people are suffering, Khanyisa, and we must speak about this as relating to mental health as well, because a lot of people are suffering and self-medicating in certain ways that at least.
Yes. You know, we are getting to, I like this connection, because you always take me to the next, and we are getting there now, because we are drawing to a close. It's getting dark now. The last part, the love one, I think I've got just 1 or 2 questions on that one. Firstly, do you think it's possible for one to love another's child unconditionally, especially in the African context?
Oh, I have seen it unconditionally. Not only have I seen it, but I'm a beneficiary of love from parents who did not birth me. I know it can be done. And I know that when you receive it as a child, you can tell of the sincerity, that on how this is meted out to you. It's not just an obligation. You don't feel like, oh, these people are straining so hard to do this, I'm an inconvenience here. No. In my case, and in this, to answer your question, now I'm going to refer to myself specifically. I am that child. I have benefited, gosh, immensely from what a lot of people term black tax. I am a beneficiary of that thing. And now
so you're not going to help us advocating against it. You're not going to help us there.
No, but I think there are layers. There are layers to it. I think there's a difference. A friend of mine recently that I had a conversation with as well, he has said we must differentiate between exploitation and pure, family responsibility and caring for our loved ones. Because I think black tax tends to be associated with exploitation, and that is accurate. A lot of people feel like, no, there's too much, it's under duress. Whereas what I'm referring to in my case, it is something that my parents did of their own free will, and with love. Some people have argued, or rather reflected, that perhaps in my case, because there are circumstances which I share in the book in my family, that a lot of people, I said, maybe that's the reason why with your particular case, your parents went all out, because the dynamics are unique, to my story in certain elements. But also, I think the heart of a human being can do it. You can love a child that is not your own, I believe, with your heart and soul. I'm not going to go into my mother's situation here, but people will discover it in the book. And some, even in my family, when I was growing up, a lot of people would say, no, she's making up for the other issue. That's why. And I believe that regardless of what the motivation was, love ended up being, the ethic by which my parents raised me and raised the rest of my siblings as well, because I was not raised as this sole child in my family, but there was love in my family for children across the board. So yes, absolutely, it can be done.
And then now the last question on that point, one wonders, yes, with the increase in the number of orphans due to social ills that are prevalent within our societies. Yes. And also on the other hand, there is an increase in instances of couples that are struggling to have their own children. The issue of infertility has become an issue. Yes. So in your view, do you think we need to advocate more for foster parenting within the African families, or the whole issue of adoption? Because almost in our society, it's still mainly non-African. Yes. In the Africans, it will be in your case wherein I take on my sister's children and so on and so on. But now if they are from, others must, they are in homes and so on and so on. Yes. And others. So do you think there's room for advocating for more foster parenting and adoption within the African society, especially those that have got the means? Yeah.
Yes, especially those that have got the means. I know that, for example, I have friends who have deliberated on adoption, and they have the means, but also there's the issue of this is not yet, a prevalent thing in the African culture to adopt outside of your family. So there are issues of the clan name. So when when this child comes from, the system, and they become your foster child or your adopted child now, do they also become Dlamini if they have now come to the Dlamini home, especially if you're you are that kind of a family? So I think we will have to contend with different dynamics in the African context if we want to go that far, because abantu who practice that might say, hey, because we don't know this child's background in terms of the clan and all of that. So if they start needing, that kind of care, the cultural, the traditional interventions, what's the story here? So it's these issues that I think we really need to be clear-headed about, as much as we are led by the hearts, because we want children to be loved, we want children to be embraced, but it also I think it also speaks to or rather it reminds me of the issue when let's say white parents adopt a black child, and people will say there are certain things about our cultures that these people will not be able to do for our children. The same applies with us as black people if we choose to adopt, because then people will be like, so where exactly is this child from?
I can even hear them saying, and I think
that's why in African families we very much. Sorry, Khanyisa Zizi. I was just going to finish off by saying, I think this is why in the African cultural context, we always advocate for families to embrace, the immediate family and the extended family as well, so that children don't have to end up in the foster system, or that children don't have, but when children are orphaned, so the two primary parents are not there, but there must be people in the family, the extended family that could have taken care of the child. But now if all else fails, we must open up our hearts and our homes and try to figure it out. Let's try and do what would serve the child best. Let's struggle while doing it, because it will take us a while to try and figure out what is the best adoption model for black people. You could study that for another 100 years or so. So I think let's just be practical about it initially and just say, you know what, here's a child who needs a home. I have the resources, or maybe I'm not even that much of somebody who practices, your cultural and your your traditional rights and such, but abantwana bayoluka, even if I'm a Christian who doesn't observe such, but there are things that you need to be cognizant of when it comes to culture.
You will take the girl one so that you don't have to deal with that.
What happened to the boy children? We love our boys too.
But I think from I'm listening to what you're saying,
yes.
And I'm thinking to myself, Miss Kapa is missing a very important point, that actually she is the one who should be advocating
for
adoption and the fostering within, because she's a product of that.
I'm a product
you were neither born by a Jola nor your mother, but look at you. I asked you, Mom, you can't give me a straight answer. You keep referring to Utatu Jola, and my question is, in your blood, is there some Jola? You had my explanation that I've got some remnants in your blood. Is there some Jola in it?
Not that I know
whatsoever.
Not that I know of.
You see?
I would have to go and ask the elders.
And here you were ushwama no Jola because they accepted you. So maybe that's the point that we need to move, or we need to investigate, because there's this thing that the ancestors, if the child come at a particular age, then gets to be welcome, then they take that as their own,
child.
They raise that as their, maybe we need to latch on that one to say, African families, make sure whilst they are still young, you go snatch them so that they
and then graft them into our family,
and they be known
Yes. And yes, Khanyisa,
Yeah.
I'm thinking if we can, I mean, if as a woman I can come to a family and marry into that family, and I'm introduced as this stranger to these ancestors who are unseen, and apparently they, you know, they can see me and they welcome me as this daughter-in-law. Why do we think that can't be done with children? You know, that we can
Point.
adopt
You
into
see,
the families.
now we are moving
Oh,
together now. So you are the best to, and you even put it very well. If they
oh
are able
man.
to accept this young lady to say,
Yes,
"Umakoti wenu ke lona,"
yes,
and then after some time, when now there's friction, umkhwenyana is start doing some,
right?
and then you told that actually your his ancestors are
Yes.
protecting you. They don't
You.
want you to get out also.
Gosh. Oh my. I think
Oh yeah,
it's
we
doable. I really think it's doable. I don't think of course okay, let me not go into my faith and such, but I think in practical terms, as African people, I don't think that love is something that we cannot practice to children. I mean, we are people who embrace all kinds of strangers in adult form. So why is it so hard for us to wrap our minds around embracing an innocent human being as our own? Why is this so difficult for us? And I think let's just try and find a formula rather than feeling so daunted. And I do hope also that our ancestors are loving people, that they are not people who want to alienate children.
exactly. Exactly. Okay,
No.
so Unathi, we took longer than I had anticipated, but I think in closing,
Yes.
let's go to the beginning.
Thank you.
When I read your introduction in the book, I was too touched. I could identify 99% or even maybe 99 point something percent.
Oh man.
And I kept saying to myself, I even wrote it down so that I don't forget. I was like, wow, this introduction is very well articulated.
Oh man.
These are the best words to describe me somehow. And I was like, I wish I can just copy and paste as an intro in my book. That
Yes.
is
Yet to come.
whichever year it was that that
Yes.
will be that it will come to life now.
Right.
Because starting from that day in your office where you decided to go all out explaining about who you are.
Yes.
You know, in my case, I was raised by Udabawo,
All right.
the person who made me who I am, Udabawo.
Wow.
Udabawo ke mosi is mamela ke,
Right.
I need to qualify this Dabawo because
Right.
in the African context, Udabawo is the sister to your father. Ne?
Yes.
In my case, the Dabawo I'm talking about is the Dabawo to my mother. Udabawo kama. So she is the sister to my mother's father.
Yes.
So, but because we grew up also Dabawo nathi sikhule sisithi Dabawo womntu wonke, ne? And now those who even uvi when I say Dabawo Shem, I don't understand because in order for them to understand, I would refer to her as my grandmother. Ne?
Wow.
So some of, especially the colleagues, they understand her to be my grandmother. Ne?
All right.
Now, when I'm talking about my grandmother and my grandfather in the same vein, people get confused because they assume that they are a couple. In fact, they are not. My grandfather was unmarried and my Dabawo's mother was unmarried. So they lived together.
What?
So you see, so I was raised by these two siblings.
Siblings, yes.
And they played a role of a couple so beautifully because the grandfather played the role of a father, and then Udabawo, who is our makul, because Udabawo to our mother, she was our mother. So they behaved like a couple, and yet they were siblings, and then they raised us. So you see, when now you're explaining about like Udabawo, no, actually my grandmother, no. actually is the double to my mother.
Yes, all those explanations. And then you, oh
And,
my word.
and when she passed away in April 2020, I was so shattered. I was so hurt.
Man.
But now, how do
I'm
you explain
sorry.
to someone who doesn't understand? Because it's like she lost her grandmother. But to me, she's not my grandmother.
She's your mother.
She's my mother.
Yes.
She made me who I am. And then now it's like, oh, okay, but it's a shame. She stayed for a while because the husband passed away in 2012. No, that was not the husband. It was the brother.
It was a brother.
So the African families, they have got a very interesting family tree and a dynamic, and yet they shape us. So you see,
they shape us.
The whole concept of adoption, I think we overrate it, because if you were to have these raising their great grandchildren, look at that woman who didn't have a child and then raised brothers, her brothers, children, and even grandchildren, as if they're her own.
Look at that. Oh, this is beautiful. Thank you for sharing, Khanyisa. Oh gosh, this is beautiful. We are grateful. Oh man.
And I think I think that's also partly why I fell in love really with this book of yours. And you know, there is a part on page 12. Can I read it?
Sure, please.
You say, I decided to share my story in the hope that someone somewhere would read it and take away something good, and maybe even liberating from it, like I did after watching those real life movies you were explaining about your love for them. You go on to say, after I started writing this book, I also searched for books with stories similar to mine. I didn't want to be the first, because most times first are shunned as freaks. I had come across a number of memoirs, but did not find one that dealt specifically with the subject of parent-child separation in the context of my culture. I doubted whether I should go public with this book. I felt it was too personal, and that it might cause a stir because it raises questions about the psychosocial impact of this separation on children who are raised by the village, in inverted commas.
Yes.
I wanted the book to fit in with the norm, whatever that is. But I soon realized that that is how I had always lived my life, trying to fit in at all costs, even in the ultimate price, or even if the ultimate price was to swallow my tongue. You see that part? I could identify with it 100%. And you know, when I was admitted at a mental institution last year, November, after all the losses that I experienced in 2012.
Yes.
On that Sunday, when I was packing, because admissions are on a Sunday, so I was packing my bags. And as I was packing, I would sit on top of the bed, cry, and then wipe my tears, because in my head it was ringing. Am I really mad?
Sure.
So I am packing because I'm going to a mental institution.
Yes.
And I'm like, okay, so what am I going to do then? So surely there will be time for me to read some books. So I took a couple of books. I'm packing because it's, you know, in the life that we live, with everything, I'm going also get to the mental, that comes also with the responsibility of taking care, and there's also the work pressures. So I haven't read because you don't even have the time to do the reading. So I thought to myself, okay, this is my time. So I had bought your copy, I think a month or two before, but I never got a chance to sit down to actually read it. So I was like, okay, I am picking this book. I am taking with and the others. So whilst I was there, I think it was in my second week, then I think ingqondo yayiseyiqala ubuya ke ngoku.
And
then I was like, Konje, I brought some books along,
yes.
So let me start reading. So I was like, okay, let me start. You see also this beautiful face of yours at the back, you know.
Yes, that girl.
When I read books, I always start at the back because they usually tell you something about the author and some reviews.
Yes.
So I was like, okay, Unathi was born and raised in the former Sister Ibandu Stado Apartheid. I'm like, this is me. I was born there. I was raised there. Okay.
This
and
is
then
my story.
goes on and goes on and goes on and goes on. And then you know what? Maybe this is the book I should start reading with. And then now you open this book, you come across that introduction. And then I'm like, who was this girl all this time?
Man.
It took me, I think, 2.5 to 3 days to read your book. And you must note that this reading was done in the early hours of the morning because they in the facility at 10 p.m. it's lights off. So all of us, we must be asleep because at 7 o'clock we should have bathed, and we are on a queue to take the BP readings, and then you go for breakfast, and then you come back for the medication before you go to class, and class starts at 8 o'clock every day until 4:30. And then by that time you're going to supper, and then you must go again on the line for the BP and the medication. And then 10 o'clock it's light out. So there's not enough time. So I'm in early bed. So at 4 a.m. I will be awake, and then I'm like reading this book the light must not be too bright because like, you're supposed to be sleeping, and they even gave us. So in that 2 days, I was like, wow. Then I also started writing down my feelings and emotions. And it's something that I've not done since 2012 when I arrived here in the Eastern Cape. And, you know, it's like the book and you are the author. So partly I can say you also contributed in bringing me back to life, because I was like, yeah, man, I used to write, you know, when I'm not feeling well, I would write my emotions, and that would help me. But I never got a chance. But now I'm reading this beautiful, I'm like, no, man, let me also start writing. And
yes.
So I started writing. They said it's angry letters, you know. These things contributed to you being here. So I was like, I was writing these angry letters. Then I was like, and then I was like, wow, I feel great. I'm looking forward to tomorrow. And then I kept this book of yours on my desk, facing this direction, because I wanted to see this face every day. I'm like, I owe it to Unathi.
Ay, Khanyisa mani. Oh my word.
And you know what, that first part that you talked about, wherein you say, because we think writing is this serious thing that requires you, but reading this book, you actually, you simplified, you made it like, you know what, it doesn't have to be in a particular format. Just go ahead, just write what you feel, the way you feel it, let the pen flow, and you'll be okay. And I think really you encouraged me to really own my life. And I think I'm not giving you a chance to speak. I'm gonna give you a chance to speak.
It's okay. Take your time.
But lastly, when I think in one of those moments, I just want you to understand the impact that or how writing can be therapeutic, and if it were also to be advocated for and be made simple in a way that people cannot imagine. there was a day wherein I came out of, we had a break.
Right.
We didn't have a class after the lunch break. Then I had an hour and a half free time. Right. So I'm sitting in my room and there are these emotions coming out from the session. And I was like, you know what? Let me just write how am I feeling, because you know almost they're gonna stay in your head and
yes.
and you end up not sleeping. So I took my notebook, and then my roommate was inside, so I went sit in a couch on the passage, at the back passage, and then right. I started writing. Then this lady comes, I'm busy writing. He comes and then he greets me, and then I say hi and I continue with my writing. Then he sits on the couch and then he looks at me and I'm like, okay, I'm not looking at, I'm like, I'm preoccupied with this yes. thing that I'm doing. And then he sits, and then the next thing I see, then he's lying, and I'm like, you know what? And then at some point, tears started coming. I'm like, you know what? I'm here, I'm minding my own business. You better mind your own business. She was yes. not talking. I continue. Then I wipe my tears again. I continue. Now, during supper time, this lady comes to me, says, she would like to have a chat with me. And I'm like, I don't understand what she could possibly, because I don't know her. Yes. And then I ignore her. And then we went for the queue for medication. And then she comes, I would like to talk. I'm like, I wonder what this woman, you know what, ne? Here we are all in this thing. I don't want yes. any burden. I'm just myself there. But she insists. I'm like, okay, you know what? After medication, let's go and sit in the couch. And then she came to apologize for interrupting me earlier when I was writing.
Shame.
She explains there that, you know what? At that time, I had a disturbing call from home. And then now I just wanted to take this thing out of me. And then I told myself that the first person I meet, I'm going to vent to her. And now I sit on the couch and then I come rushing. And then I get there. You are busy writing and I want to talk to you. You are not even paying attention. You are writing. And then I sit there admiring you. And I'm like, I wish I can say, can you also give me a piece of paper?
And I can write too. Oh gosh. Oh man.
It's so hard. And I was like, but you should have asked. I would have given you the paper. And then she said, you know what? I need the paper because I need to also start writing.
Oh
then
my
the following
goodness.
day, she started writing, and you know, it's helping. So, Ms. Kapa, you really encouraged me to own my life the way you cannot imagine. And I therefore say, thank you so much. There is certainly a purpose in your existence. There's a point where you mentioned that in your introduction. So I don't want you to doubt that. There is.
Thank you. Oh man, thank you so much. I'm truly humbled and honored and overwhelmed. I'm at a loss, but I'm glad that this book has been such an instrumental tool in your healing, most importantly, that it brought you to that place of actually writing yourself. And what you're saying about the simplicity, it was very intentional on my part, because I always thought that books were for certain people. And then I came to a point where I was like, you know what? We need to make books accessible for all of us. How can we expect everyone to read books if sometimes you need to decode them? And, you know, there's this jargon, there's all of this, and what literature does. And this book is just humbly coming to join, you know, the literature that is already there, the archive that is there from all parts of the world. And for our African people specifically, I felt we have always been storytellers. We have always been people who, I mean, sobabini sikulela ezilalini, and I'm going to make an assumption that mhlambi nani, you had those late night, you know, stories in Zomi. In Zomi, yes, just before bedtime, because for us, there weren't bedtime stories, there were more than that. And this means that we love stories. On radio, we would listen to stories being read from books. We have always
Yes.
loved
Yes.
stories, and I think we need to remind ourselves of that. And now, most importantly, to
Yes.
give ourselves the permission to write them. Write them. So I'm so happy to hear that you're writing, you're journaling, you're reflecting, wherever that leads for you personally. But for me to know that this book has brought you to that place, you is more than enough. It's more than enough. And even if you were the only person who had read it and I would hear this testimony, it would be enough. I'd be like, my job is done. That's it. So I appreciate this so much.
We need to get more people.
We do. No,
We
we
need
do.
to get more people to read it. We do.
Absolutely.
And I think, you know, in this simplicity that you, and I also like your comments to say wherever that reading will be. And I think maybe in the next conversations, because there are pointers that this story of yours has actually provoked, you know, the issue of Isiduko and the clan. We need to have a conversation around that. And there are many stories that are out there that those that are in position of calling, because you can say it's untold stories and then you end up with that collection. But at that point, you need people to start writing how they are feeling, where it's going to lead. It's something else. There's the issue that we just talked about adoption and the African culture. And I'm saying you're an advocate for that because you were raised by a Jola, whereas as far as you know, we don't have any Jola. The issue about the parents that do not declare their will and testament in good time, such that their legacy is protected. We've got untold stories in that regard that we wouldn't even want to get. We just want that part so that others, because really, when you read something that you identify with, it encourages you, because you are like, I'm not the only one going through this. And I think there's a point also in your book where you mentioned your healing journey, your sessions toward therapy. I thought that we'll also talk about that, but we don't have time, maybe another day. But to me, it made me feel when I was in that to say, you know what, mental health is real, and there's nothing wrong with it. Because there are others that have also gone through their own. It's just that it's something that is not talked about. So maybe the time has come that with the pressures that we have, we need to talk openly about it, so that people, they do not wait until too long, because that's also what I learned when I was in the institution, that the cases, they vary. Those that waited longer ended up the damage and the harm was greater, such that even the treatment that they get to be put in equates that. And you're like, if we're encouraged to you know, there's a part also, I think, in the way you talk about the turmoils inside. We all have our own turmoils inside, but we don't have space to voice that out, such that we are well and content. Hence it then leads to. So really, Miss Kapa, Sis Unathi, my Jola, you just need to have a combo. When you say, well, you must put all of them all in once.
I have a hyphenate existence. It's wow, why?
Yes,
all of that. Oh man, thank you
so much. I really I'm grateful. I'm thankful.
Sure.
See you at Steve Biko on
the 28th of February at Steve Biko Center, Echo. Oh yes, I'm looking forward to that.
We shall see you there.
All
the best of luck with everything. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Khanyisa. Thank you. And I want to wish you all the best on your journey, and may your healing bring healing to others too. And yeah, well, the rest we will take offline. Thank you so much.